All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our second session for the theme China threat. As explained yesterday, this particular theme reflects the current geopolitical climate. And we have seen the rise of China, and China's caused a lot of changes in the international system. And some countries, in particular the democratic West, they view China as a threat. And based on that narrative, they frame their security and foreign policies in order to contain the rise of China and contain China as a security threat. So we've kind of moved back to the state-centric traditional view of security. We've moved away from that after the Cold War, but with the rise of China, we're changing again. The world is evolving and the environment has rapidly changed to what it is today. So China has really caused major changes to the balance of power in the world today. So we started off yesterday by listening to three wonderful presenters with the answers to their respective questions. For this period, we have four presenters. Those with I will be representing to 4 to 5. We have Ms. Ringin, Lynette, and Cecilia Elias for Group 6, and Mr. Don Ogi. So without further delay, I ask our presenter representing Group 4, Ms. Swagili, to begin the presentation. Thank you.
So I will be representing Group 4 to answer question 4. The question reads, as described by Christensen, what is the main difference between the bottle cap analogy in comparison to the eggshell? So as I go along, I will try to use these two analogies to describe the China, US-Japan alliance and the security dilemma in the East Asia. So primarily the role of the US presence in the East Asia, particularly in Japan, is to help lessen the security dilemmas and to prevent potential tensions from arising between the East Asian countries. Going back in history, in the Cold War period, the US-Japan alliance during the Cold War possessed a mistrust to the Northeast Asian countries, especially to China. Thus, as a way of assuring the Northeast Asian countries of their neutrality, the US has advised Japan to implement non-offensive rules that must be reasonably unthreatening to its neighboring Northeast Asian countries. So Christensen described the presence of US in Japan as a bottle cap, meaning to say keeping the Japanese military genie in a bottle. This is manifested in the US guide for Japan to implement non-offensive rules. He then made the comparison to the eggshell, where the US watches and monitors the growth of the Japanese military power under the US protection until one day it hatches. To use this analogy in a real event scenario, let's look at the joint argument between US and Japan in 1990, when Japan gave access to US forces to have access to its base, where both countries agreed to participate in an ongoing study of ballistic missile defense. This move by the Japan and US may be defensive, but is seen as offensive by the other Northeast Asian countries. So Christensen further stressed that since 1996, fears about the eggshell function of the US-Japan alliance have gradually increased, whereas the faith in the bottle cap function dropped. The eggshell function is seen as a defensive approach, whilst the the bottle cap function is seen as a defensive approach, whilst the eggshell function gives the impression of an offensive approach. Therefore, to answer the question, the main difference between the bottle cap and the comparison to the eggshell analogies respectively is that there is an increase in the eggshell, whereas a drop in the bottle cap analogies. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Swagili, for sharing with us your answer to the assigned question on behalf of the group. We now move on to group 5, and Lynette Ringen will share the answer with us.
On behalf of the group 5, our question which was assigned to us reads, Cam wrote that international relations theorists have traditionally associated the rise and fall of great power with war and instability. So do you think the rise of China will lead to war and instability? From our discussion, we stated that first of all, a nation state going to war and causing instability with another nation, they depends much on the proximity of the issues between them. Why? Because not all negotiations end in conflicts and not all conflicts end in war. So in reference to China's rising power, there is two important concepts which can be analyzed from China's rise in all aspects of its areas: politics, military, and economy. So the first concept is China rise is an opportunity to create relationship ties. So a scenario which we have discussed is South Korea response to China's rise. So to date, China has already been seen as a re-emerging new power. It has a close relationship with North Korea, which is South Korea's rival since 1950s. So on the other hand, South Korea has a strong relationship with the US, but sometimes South Korea opposes not to follow US strategies. So to South Korea, it sees China as a friend more than a threat because of the primary concern they have over North Korea. And noting that North and South Korea are rivals, South Korea moves closer to China for help to settle the issues and is benefiting from China while still maintaining a close relationship with the US. And one good example would be PNG also, who is benefiting from Chinese loans and what is contained in the BRI project. To our second answer, China rise may lead to war and instability, which is of course a yes answer. So in today's media, most of the scholars, writers, and authors talk about China rise in the international arena, posing a threat to the international and national security of a state. So which may lead to war and instability, which is true if you look at it from a negative side. Since there is so much issues arising regarding state accumulation of power in the international level, China is now the re-emerging new power re-emerging state influencing other parts of the world, economically, politically, and military, especially the Pacific regions, posing a threat to other nation states that China might conquer the world, leading to war with other nation states forming alliances to counter Chinese influence. Thank you, and that's all.
Thank you, Lynette, Caro, and Group 5 for sharing with us your answer to the assigned question. If you have any questions for Roswitha or Lynette, please take note and then post in the discussion forum for this week, either as a video or audio file. We now move on to Cecilia. Cecilia will be representing group 6.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, Carol and Lynette, can you? Yes, thank you. All right. Go ahead, please, Cecilia.
Good morning, everyone. I'll be representing group 6 to answer our given question. That is, what is the policy of containment according to Sheinbaum? So before answering the question, I'll be defining what containment is. So Oxford Dictionary defines the term containment as the act of keeping another country's power within limits so that it does not become so powerful. So the policy of containment came about during the Cold War, where the USA used the policy of containment to control the spread of the Soviet Union's influence of communism by giving aid in terms of economic, military, and political aid to Middle Eastern countries fighting against communist aggression. So after the Cold War, USA was seen to be on top of the hegemon. However, the rise of China's economy had grown rapidly, and so was their military and political drive, in which the USA saw that as a threat to the global security and, of course, the interest of USA. So according to Sheinbaum, what is the policy of containment? In this case, looking at China, containment is a policy set by the Western nations that as much as possible to contain the growing influence of China and keeping them in isolation in order to counter the rise and expansion of China. However, this policy poses a growing concern if China were to be contained. That is, that policy will be working directly against the Western desires to improve human rights, stimulate civil society, and pluralize politics in China, meaning to say that China will be free from the global system's influence, and that will be dangerous to the Western interest. So to say that this policy of containment might not work in this case of China, as stated by Sheinbaum 2000, page 208, and I hope the central argument is that containment of China is a badly flawed policy option, close quotation. So moreover, there is a strong argument on the policy of engagement, which offers the best chance to have China participate in the international rule-based regime instead of having them contained. At the same time, maintain open channels for bilateral national interest. So this policy of engagement might take years to have China engage and integrate into the existing global system order. However, there is no alternative but to try. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia and Group 6. Very, very interesting answer to the question in relation to containment. The containment policy might also have, economic implications on PNG and other countries in the Pacific region who depend very much on China for trade. We'll now move on to the final presenter for this period, Mr. Donogi, who will be representing Group 7.
Guys, can you hear me? Hello.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the question which I am to present about is question 7, and the question reads about China's rise, and the question here reads that do you agree with Kang with the statement that China is not yet a true peer competitor with the US? So first of all, I would like to define the two words, peer and competitor as defined by the Oxford Dictionary. So here I saw the definition that peer, it gave me 3 definitions. So the definition which I was in a different way where they see them as, or China is not rising, or USA is still at a level where it's still above China's level of, I would say, analysis, where people see China. Okay, so for the question, to answer the question, do you agree with China? Do you agree that Kang mentions the statement that China is not a true peer competitor with the US? So from the readings, China has already been growing rapidly, as most of us knows, almost for 3 decades. There is evidence that China is developing and developing at a fast rate within the region, and it's developing into balancing the state of hegemony China is up to within the region. So, from the book The Rise of China, as mentioned by Sin M. Lin Jones, she mentions that there's a dramatic increase in China's economic and political power, were among the most important changes in the international politics during the 1980s and the 1990s. So given our question here, we can see that most of the writers or scholars, they see that China is a potential competitor to US, given this fact that there is increasing rise in China's economy, not economy only, but the military power as well, and influences within the region. So China's vast territory and huge population has made China a potential superpower for decades. But this potential did not come close to being realized until China embarked on an ambitious program of economic reform and modernization in the 1970s and 1980s. So from that embarkation, China's gross domestic product increased more than a quadruple between 1978 and 1999. So there were also other economic indicators such as the level of trade and foreign reserves. They also went up. So at the same time, China began to modernize its armed forces. It engaged with other international countries, overseas countries, and took in modernized armed weapons for each force in the country. So this movement stimulated many debates among scholars within the area of study. So at least there were 4 themes prominent within the debates of China's rise. So the first one would be how large China's economy and military capabilities are. Okay, so this most in concerning this area, most scholars try to analyze the capabilities or what China is capable of doing regarding military and the economic power which China possesses. The second argument or the second theme that rises up from the rise of China, scholars imply that what does the growth of China imply for the peace and stability of the international system? So that's the second one, theme that arises from the China's rise. So the third one, what are China's intentions, which basically talks about how China how China realizes the world and what it intends to do with what it comes up with or the capabilities it has. The fourth and final one, which is of interest to me, is how should the US and other countries respond to China's growing power. So during the mid-1990s, American commentators debated whether the United States should pursue a policy of containment, engagement toward China. So although the content of this alternative was often unclear, containment usually implied threatening China as a potential military adversary. So meaning they saw China as a threat regarding the national security or its growing influence within the region was predicted or seen as a threat to USA. So attempting to limit its economic growth, China's economic growth, restricting access to military, significant technology, and the US also punished China for human rights violation and strengthening US alliances and military capabilities that were at least directed to China. So when we come back to our question, do you agree with the statement made by Kang that China is not a true peer competitor with the US? From my view, I would say that most of the evidence as presented by many of the scholars within the area of international relations and field concerned with security and the global area as well. Most of the scholars, they see that China as a soft power, it is starting to, I would say that it's a country which pursue its interest and how it aligns its national interest with the world around it. It is like it's concerned with the national security. So how it aligns its national security policy or for that national security, I would say that countries that are within the region or the international security environment might view that China is a threat to them, but there is also other articles or information that would provide that China pursues a much more different view than most of the countries or the leaders or the scholars perceive about the rise of China. So I would say that there is much debate about the position where China sits at this moment, because I would say that there are many views or many perspectives to see the rise of China. in the sense that there's a realistic view, there's a constructive view in viewing the rise of China. So there may be many of the ideas where people come up with to define, analyze, and explain the rise of China. So that is what I have to present to the class for. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ogi. Thank you for sharing your answers with us on behalf of Group 7. And please take care of the dog at the back. Yeah, puppy. Okay, that brings us to the end of our session for today. We had from Roswitha, from Dinette, from Cecilia, and from Mr. Ogi, Don. So if you have any questions or comments for them, please post on our forum in either audio or video form so I can tally up your participation. Just before we go, the statement is China is not a peer competitor. And I have this comparison from Lowy Institute to just to make a few points before. Yeah, if you look at the okay, if you look at this diagram, that gives you a summary of what Don has shared with us, the answer to his question. If you look at economic relationships, China has outranked the US. China is ranked number 1 and the US is ranked number 2. China has a score of 99.0 in terms of economic relationships with countries, and the US has a score of 51.1. If you look at economic capability, China has a score of 92.2, and the United States has a score of 90.7. So just a difference of 1. But if you look at military capability, China is behind the US. China is ranked number 2 and the US number 1. China's score is 91.7, while 66.8, and the US has a score of 91.7. In terms of defense networks, China's score is very low, and China's ranking is very low as well. It's ranked 8th place, and there's a score of 24.1, while the US is ranked number 1 for defense networks, defense alliances with countries like India, India, Australia, France, New Zealand, Canada. So 83.4. So if you look at this diagram, you see that the Asian Power Index, when comparing the US with China, China is not a peer competitor because China, in terms of military capability and defense network, China has a lot of work to do in order to catch up with the US, in order to compete with the US as a peer. But otherwise, in terms of economic capability and economic relationships, China has overtaken the US and is now the world's leading economic power. Compared to the US, we can say the US is the world's leading military power. So we have this military power going against an economic power. So there's a potential there that China might use its economic capability to build up its military power. So that's why many countries are, the US has come up with the China threat theory or the China threat narrative. So we'll continue to listen to our peers next week when they present in the second session for the theme China threat. But just make sure you have a look at the Asia Lowy Institute's Asia Power Index, the 2021 edition, to see the comparison between the United States and China. So they have a really good analytical tool that will help you understand why the United States is ranked number 1 comparative power in the Asian region. China is ranked number 2 for comparative power. Okay, with that, we'll stop here. Thank you for attending. Those on Facebook as well, thank you for tuning in and watching our live streaming. You all have a good day, and we'll catch you again next week, Monday, or I'll see you again next week, Monday. And we also thank the presenters for today and the groups for your cooperation and for your assistance. And we thank all our viewers on Facebook as well. Please continue to watch, and if you have any questions, post on Facebook so our presenters can respond to the questions and comments. Okay, that is all for today. You all have a good day, and this brings us to the end of our session. Right.